We have the air on here. We don't have the window. Welcome, you guys, to our series, Equipping You with Elite Negotiating Skills in Your Next IEP 504 Meeting. If we haven't met, I'm Mayer Cunningham, Special Education Boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. And we're so excited to have Don Fieselman and Sandy Hein here to teach us skills to have successful student outcomes, which is always our one goal. They have been in the most high conflict situations. They're both former hostage negotiators with successful outcomes. And so if they can negotiate with strangers who don't want to participate, then they can teach us skills that we need to have better outcomes when we're working for kids with disabilities. And so Sandy and Don are amazing mentors of mine. They've been my personal coaches and trainers. Their training is impeccable. We'll get you information at the end to learn more about that. But Sandy and Don, I'm gonna let you guys take it away.
Okay. So Don is a newbie, so I'll go first. I'm happy to be back. I don't remember when I was here last. It's been a little bit now, but happy to be back here just in case there's new people on that don't remember who I am. I was a police officer for 23 years in the city of Alexandria, which is Northern Virginia, where there is no representation, so bum. But I worked there for 23 years, left there, taught school for 6 years, so I do have some experience. I have gone to IEP meetings. I know what a 504 is because I was involved in a few things like that. So familiar with the education setting. And then I went back to Black Swan. I worked with them a little bit starting in about 2011 and then went full-time in 2020 and have been full-time with them since then. And Don?
I retired. Well, I was a police officer in a little town in Idaho, Pocatello, it's called. And then I moved to Las Vegas, Nevada in 1996. And I was a cop here for about 25 years, a little over. I was on the hostage negotiation team. When I retired, I was an assistant team leader on the team. And after I retired, they gave me a volunteer spot. So whenever I want to, I can go out and play around with the hostage negotiators. After I retired, I joined the Black Swan team, which is, I've had so much fun here. This is such good stuff. And now I still do Black Swan, and I just went back part-time as a cold case homicide investigator about 2 weeks ago. So that's what I'm doing. And I know what a 504 is too.
There you go. Sweet. We're up on it. Okay, so what we decided that we were going to do today, we're going to kind of start from the beginning. I was here before and we kind of just answered questions and went through a few things, but we're going to start to actually go through skills and go through things with you from the beginning so that you get a full feeling for everything that we do with the Black Swan group and the ways in which it's going to be able to help you when you go into these IEP meetings. So the base of our foundation, the Black Swan method, is tactical empathy. So tactical empathy is what you're trying to achieve. It's the goal in any difficult conversation or negotiation that you're in. That's what you're trying to get to. So it's really important because tactical empathy, though it sounds scary because that word tactical, it makes you think of the ninja guys with the long guns and the black masks. And so people get a little uncomfortable when they hear that word, but there's a reason why we use it. We use it because what we're doing is calibrated. It's the calibrated application of emotional intelligence. So done on purpose. It's you basically looking at the other side and recognizing what's going on with them and then actually vocalizing it. And that is the important part because most of us, we use our intuition and we pick up on different things, that the other side is giving us. We get certain vibes. We hear little voices in the back of our head. The hair kind of raises up on the back of our neck. And we understand that there are things going on and we feel those things. Sometimes we even think those things, but we never say them out loud. And that's where the problem is because a lot of times things that you're recognizing like that, if you're not speaking them out into the ether, they can't have any kind of effect. So at the Black Swan group, what we do is we go over things with people that are these specific skills that you can use to actually get to tactical empathy. So you heard me say intuition. When we're talking about getting to empathy, intuition is really important because Your conscious mind, the mind that you're just sitting there thinking with right now, processes 40 bits of information per second, 40. Your unconscious mind processes 20 million bits of information per second. So you notice there's a huge difference there. So if you can learn how to pick up on all those little things that are happening on the other side with your intuition, if you learn how to recognize all that stuff that's being thrown at you, whether they want to or not, because it's just human nature, if you can recognize that and then actually vocalize it, that's the quickest way to get to tactile empathy. So sometimes you can get to tactile empathy without using any of our skills. If you're really good, some people are naturally empathetic. Some people don't have any trouble at all actually employing empathy. For some people, it's a little more difficult. We put these skills out here and we use these skills because it's basically the quickest way to do it. It makes it easy. It gives your brain basically a path to take to use these skills to actually help you get to tactical empathy. Don, is there anything you want to add before I keep going?
No, you're doing great.
Okay. So some people get confused because they get confused with empathy and sympathy, and they're not the same thing. Okay. Sympathy is you basically bringing your stuff to the table, because when you're using sympathy, you're feeling what the other side is feeling, but it's about you. So if somebody says, oh, my back's been hurting a lot, and you can say, oh yeah, my back hurts too. Well, you just made it about you. And in empathy, it's not about you. It's all about the other side. I don't want to say you don't matter, but you don't matter. It's all about them. It's not about how you think or feel. It's about how they think and feel. So you have to disregard yourself pretty much and put yourself completely on their side and look at things from their perspective. That is empathy. Okay. Thing about using empathy, for one thing, you're keeping it about them, but when you're using empathy, it actually allows you to get that other perspective. It's important because if you keep thinking about things from your point of view, you're missing things on the other side. So one of the things that happens a lot when I'm coaching people is they understand this. They've already looked at the skills. Some people have already read the book, so they know labels, they know mirrors, and they feel like they should just be able to throw a skill out there, and then they're going to get to empathy. But there has to be a genuine curiosity on your side. You have to be genuinely curious about what's happening across the table from you. If you are, and you're in that proper mindset, you can put yourself kind of in their shoes and look at things from their perspective. And that is what's going to get you where you need to go. Because if you're still looking at things from your own point of view, you're missing things on the other side. If you learn how to listen at a good level, and we're going to get to that in a little bit, but when you learn how to listen at a good level, you can actually pick up things on the other side that they're not saying. And that sounds ridiculous, but when you're having a conversation with someone, they're saying all kinds of things. What you're looking for when you're diving deep is you're looking for what they're not saying, because people say a lot of things and they actually speak around things sometimes that they want to come out, but they don't know how to share it or they don't know how to say it. So when you pick up those little tidbits of information with your intuition, the best thing you can do is call them out. And that's going to be the fastest way for them to understand that you get them. Two things people like more than anything else in the world: feel heard and to feel understood. So a lot of people always tell me, no, it's love and money. No, it's not love and money. We all want that, but what we really need intrinsically, what we really feel really good about, is when someone is listening to us and when they're demonstrating that they actually understand us. Not fake understanding, because a lot of people do that. They say, oh yeah, I get it. Well, there's a couple things wrong with that. One, saying you get it doesn't mean you get it, and it doesn't demonstrate to the other side that you get it. And when you say I get it, you're making it about yourself. So you don't want to do that. Okay. The word I can be dangerous when you're first learning this stuff, because if you keep using the word I, you're pulling the conversation back about you. Now, once you've practiced enough and you get used to doing this, throwing the word I out there and including yourself in some way won't be detrimental to you. But at first, if you keep using the word I, the natural inclination you're going to have is to make it about you. So we caution you against that. Don?
That's, I was just sitting here thinking, and people they do the I and they bring it to themselves. And what Sandy's talking about here with the tactical empathy is a way to get what you want. Just so you just, if I don't know how many of you were here last time, but this is how to let the other side have your way.
Mhm.
So keep in mind that while we're talking about how to demonstrate tactical empathy, you're going to win this negotiation. You're going to win this difficult conversation, but you have to trust the process.
Yeah.
So this stuff all takes shape over the course of our little talk here, and you'll see how, if you're, if you want to know how to get somewhere in a conversation, this is how to get somewhere.
Yeah, a lot of people feel like, but I'm putting so much effort in up front and I'm making it all about them and all about what about me? Well, the thing that you're doing is you're kind of building up that obligation on the other side. Because what empathy does is it helps you develop rapport. It helps you build a trust-based influence, which is what you want on the other side, because you can use our powers for evil and you can manipulate people with them. The thing that you don't realize is when you're being manipulated. If you think about it, anytime in the past that someone's been trying to manipulate you, you felt it. You may not have understood exactly what was happening, but you had that feeling of this doesn't feel good. That's how people feel when you manipulate them. So what you're actually going for when you use our skills is a trust-based influence. So manipulation, influence. People say, well, what's the difference? Because you're using your stuff to manipulate. No, your intent is the difference. If you are intending to manipulate, it will be felt. If you are intending to get that trust-based influence, that's what will happen. Okay. This is why I say you have to say genuine curiosity about what's happening on the other side. Now, with empathy, you don't have to be nice. You don't have to like them. You don't have to agree with them, but you do have to stay genuinely curious about where their mind is and what's going on in their brain on the other side. Because no, you don't have to be nice. It's good to be likable, because the more likable you are, the easier it is to develop that rapport and get that trust-based influence. If you're not a likable person, sometimes people have a hard time connecting to you. So likability is huge. That just means be nice, smile, talk with a nice, pleasant tone of voice. Those are the things that make you likable, and listening to the other side and making the conversation about them. Now, once you do all of that, reciprocity will kick in, because when you are having an interaction with someone and you make them feel so good and so heard and so understood, an obligation forms on their side to return that favor. And that's where the return comes back to you. Okay. So when they feel genuinely heard and understood, they feel a need to give you that same satisfaction. So because of that, what happens with tactical empathy is it brings you the ability to form nice, strong relationships that actually last. Okay, long-term relationship maintenance and building is what happens with tactical empathy. Also, it helps you preemptively get rid of all of those negative emotions. What people don't understand is emotions themselves are not bad for difficult conversations and negotiations. It's the negative emotions that are bad. So anytime you get the opportunity to be able to diffuse or mitigate something negative on the other side, you should take that opportunity, because the sooner that you can mitigate it or diffuse it, the sooner it gets out of your way. Because when people are holding on to bits of negative things that they're thinking or feeling, they're taking up space in their brain. And that's less space you have to work with what you're trying to do with them. So if you just demonstrate that you understand that they feel this negative thing on the other side, they can actually let go of it. It's amazing when you see this work the first time. I'm sure Karen has had this experience. It's amazing when there's an elephant in the room and everybody knows there's an elephant in the room. And I know I've been in those meetings when there's stuff going on and everybody knows that there's this negative thing sitting there. No one wants to talk about it because everyone's afraid to talk about it because it's this negative thing. And if we bring it up, it's gonna blow up the room. That's how everyone feels. Honestly, when the elephant is in the room, if nobody calls it out, it tramples all over everything. It keeps you from building any kind of empathy. It stops that good rapport. It stops the overall good feeling of the meeting. So bringing up the negative doesn't make it more prominent. It actually mitigates it, because when you bring it up and you say it seems like we have a little confusion here between the direction that everyone's going. And because these people want to go that way, these people want to go that way. So point it out. Instead of letting it sit there and then trying to work it out some way, you have to call the problem out, because once the problem is out in the open, then you can openly work on it and it's not so contentious anymore. But you have to be willing to say that. You can't have a fear of pulling out the negative. Don, you look like you're itching to go.
No, not at all. You're doing
Oh,
great. I'm just nodding in the affirmative.
okay.
Because this is there's not a test here, but if there was, this would be a test question. And that is, fear is the single biggest driver of human decision making and behavior. And if you don't call out that elephant in the room,
Yep.
you're gonna slog through your conversation because you're just letting all these obstacles stick up in your way. Sandy's doing a great job. I'll shut up.
No, Don always has great stuff to add. I love working with him because usually what's happening with us is he'll be teaching a certain part and I'll realize he didn't say something, so I'll fill it in. And when I'm talking, there are times when we say this so much that I forget, did I say this time or not? So then he comes in and says, and then he'll add something, which makes it all make sense. So you're really lucky to actually to have both of us here, because you'll get a very full picture just in case one of us misses something. And Karen's done this so much too, she could probably add in things left and right too. She's heard these presentations several times too. But I am very passionate about tactile empathy. When I first started with the Black Swan group, I realized we were teaching everybody all of these skills. We were teaching them what we call our N9, which is the core skills of the Black Swan method. The problem was they knew all these skills, but they didn't know what the goal of using the skills was. The goal is tactical empathy. What you're going for is tactical empathy. The important part of the conversation is the tactical empathy. So the purpose for the skills is actually to build that. So in order to be able to do that, you have to understand what tactical empathy is, what the mindset is when you're using it, what direction you're going in with the conversation, keeping it all about them. All of those things are important, because if you start using the skills and you don't really know where you're trying to get with them, it feels like you're just going in an endless loop and like there's no goal, there's no outcome, because you just keep talking in circles. So knowing what you're going for and knowing the feeling that you're trying to get from the other side, which is them feeling so good and so heard and so understood, that's what the effort of using the skills is going to get for you. So you've heard me talk about the levels of listening, and I think we did talk about this last time. Did we, Karen, talk about the levels? We didn't. Okay. See, I forget. So there are 5 levels or layers of listening. And the reason I hit this home so much is because I realized when I first started doing individual coaching with people, the reason they couldn't use the skills very well is because they were horrible listeners. And quite frankly, all of us are horrible listeners. Most people in this world are underperforming by about 60% when it comes to actually listening, because we think we're paying attention, but we're really not listening on a level that we should be to get to empathy. So 5 levels. First one is you basically getting the gist of what the other side is saying. And then you're moving back to either thinking about what you need to get at the grocery store, or thinking about how many emails you have to answer before you can go home tonight. You're basically still in your own head, which is still making it about you. And when you're making it about you, it's not tactical empathy. So level 1, not even close to tactical empathy listening. So we call that listening intermittently. I think I know what you're saying. I'm just going to get the gist of it, and then I don't have to listen anymore because I already know where you're going with this. You stop paying attention. Level 2, I affectionately call this the marriage killer, because you are essentially listening until you hear what you want to argue or what you want to support or what you want to fix. And then you stop listening, and then you're sitting there going, okay, stop talking, because I know what to say to you. I know what to say to you. I know what to say to you. And you're missing everything else they're saying because you're so stuck on the part that you've picked out that you want to deal with. So then you deal with that and you've missed everything else. Once again, all about you. So far, out of 5 levels, the first 2 levels, all about you, not going to get you to empathy because you're still stuck in your own head. So level 3 is where the magic starts. So when you get to level 3, what you're listening for is the internal logic of the other side. In other words, why are they saying what they're saying? Where are they going with this? Why does this make sense to them? This is the hugest part right here. Hugest, is that a word? That didn't sound right.
It is now.
Yes, it is now. I said it, therefore it is a word. So
Biggest.
yeah, there you go. Biggest part Thank you. The biggest, the Texan says that. Of course, everybody in Texas knows the word big, right? Everything's bigger in Texas. So, and I just lost my train of thought. The biggest part of getting to empathy is thinking about what's happening in the mind of the person across from you. So if you're at level 3 and you're saying to yourself, why does this make sense to them? Where are they going with this? Why does this matter to them? When you're thinking those things, you're going to start getting feedback based on things that you're feeling and things that they're saying. You're going to start being able to piece together this little puzzle in your head about what's actually happening with them. That's the beauty of listening at that level. You completely disregard yourself and you're totally focused on the other side. Now, if you can get to level 3 at any important conversation or negotiation or at this meeting, if you can just make yourself stay at level 3 during that meeting, you're going to uncover things that you missed before because you only listened for what you thought you wanted to hear and then you stopped listening. So at these meetings, if you start listening on that level 3, why is this person saying what they're saying? Why is that person saying what they're saying? And you think about where it's coming from all the different points of view, you're going to have more information than you know what to do with. Because when you start listening and you get out of your own head, you're actually provided with a lot more, even when they're not saying something. Because when you're listening that deeply, you're picking up cues. Your intuition is telling you certain things. So you're getting more information than you've ever gotten before. Now, once you get to that level 3, you can stay there and be fine, or you can pop up to level 4 if you need to, which is actually you figuring out what emotions are attached to that logic. Now, in an IEP meeting, in a 504 meeting, this can be huge because, especially when you're talking about listening to the parents, because they do have a lot of emotions around what's going on with their kid. And so you want to actually listen to what they have to say. You want to think about their perspective, where it's coming from. It's also really important when you're talking about the teachers in the room, because a lot of them, and I can tell you this from experience, don't know what the hell they're doing in that room. They really don't have a clue. The first meeting I went to, I was like, what is this and why am I here? I have no clue what I'm supposed to be doing. So a lot of them really have no idea what's happening. So if they start talking, they're saying things that don't make sense to you, it's probably because they literally don't know what they're supposed to be adding to the meeting, which actually can be dangerous because you want them to be more informed than that. You want them to know what they're doing coming in there, what their purpose is being there. And, once I caught on to what I was supposed to do, because nobody really tells you these things, I realized that things that I said did have an impact on things that were going to happen with this student. So I could say, well, this student doesn't have a problem in my class, and that doesn't help anything. The problem is I had an elective class and the kids that were in my class wanted to be in my class and they usually wanted to work for me. So for me, it was difficult to know any problems that they were having because I had their full attention and I had them working hard in my class, but in their math class, it's completely different. So, you want to be careful with the teachers in the room and listening to what they're saying and getting their perspective and where it's coming from, because you want to make sure that you understand what their interaction is with that child. And based on the way they're talking about them and their activities, that's going to give you a lot of information. Because for me, I couldn't really speak to a lot of the problems that some of these kids were having because I didn't have the issues in my class that they were dealing with. So you want to make sure you know where that teacher's coming from because they might not know what they're supposed to be adding. And if you're listening to them, you can figure that out on your own. Okay. And maybe even prompt them with a couple of good labels to get a little bit more information. If nothing else, to get them to say, I don't see that in my room. Don.
And to connect a dot here, remember when if you think somebody in the room doesn't know their role, or if you think that they are misguided in some way, or they're saying things that you don't like, remember, and Sandy will hit this a lot more, but don't explain it to them. Listen so that you understand what they don't get. Try to find out where they're at. Because if you just assume that they don't know their role or they're not fulfilling what their role should be, now is not the time to explain just yet. Use the skills, trust the process, stay genuinely curious. And I know Sandy said that a bunch. I'm going to keep throwing it out there too, because when you're genuinely curious, it's harder to get triggered across the table. It's harder to get angry. It's harder to get to want to bust out into an explanation. If you're genuinely curious about why it makes sense to them, you'll do better in your conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And that is really huge because at some point during this whole series that we're doing here, we're going to get into attacks and how to handle attacks. And one of the ways that you stop yourself from reacting to an attack is by staying curious, because curiosity and anger don't work together. If you stay curious about what's happening when you're getting attacked, you're less likely to attack back because your brain is too busy trying to figure out where this is coming from. Why is this happening? So you're keeping it occupied with figuring that out as opposed to reacting to what's happening in the moment. So where was I? Level 4. Level 4, you're looking for that emotion behind the logic, because there's always some kind of emotion tied in. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a feeling kind of emotion. It could be a specific dynamic that's happening. Okay. So you're looking for whatever it is that is behind what they're saying. And you may have to bump up to a level 4. You may not. Okay. But the thing is, if all of a sudden you need to identify where the emotions are, what the emotions are, where they're coming from, and you need to be able to bump up to a level 4. If you're not at a level 3, if you're down at 1 or 2, when you're still in your own brain, it's really hard to get up to 4 if you have to go there. So anytime you know you're going to be in this difficult conversation or negotiation, you want to be at that level 3. So that if you need to bump up to that level 4, very simple. Now, level 5 is exhausting. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not some place that you can maintain for a very long time. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of thought process, a lot of focus to be able to listen to someone. That's why I call this the granddaddy of listening, because you're doing it all. Not only are you listening for why it makes sense to them and what the emotion is tied to it, you're looking at the symbolism that it holds for them. You're looking at how it affects their entire worldview. You're looking at how it impacts their lives in general. When I used to do negotiations that would go for an extended period of time, and I had to stay at that level 5 for a long time, I would be, first of all, the adrenaline was so high that I never really knew how much time passed. But when your adrenaline stays that high for that long, you will crash at some point. So once that time comes and you start to crash, even though you thought it was only 3 or 4 hours in, but you were actually on the phone for 10 hours, it's 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 almost debilitating with the amount of energy that it takes, which is why we're not telling you to stay at level 5. We're saying there may be a time when stuff starts hitting the fan in this meeting, when you have to bump to level 5 just for a couple seconds to kind of get a grip on things. You cannot maintain that. Stay at level 3. The goal is to stay at level 3 and to stay curious about what the other side is saying, where it's coming from. And it's very easy to get an emotion to attach to that really quickly without having to try too much harder, as long as you're already at level 3. This is something that you need to practice, because I guarantee you, a lot of you, if you're thinking about it right now, especially your personal interactions that you have on a daily basis, if some of you are teachers, I know, because hello, been there. There are kids in the room that you don't want to listen to on a level 3. You barely want to listen to them on a level 1. So it takes a lot sometimes to focus in on people on a level 3. And it is a lot more tiring than just halfway listening. It does take some work and it takes some getting used to. But if you start listening as much as possible on a level 3 on a daily basis, it becomes a lot easier to go there very quickly. So you're dealing with a room full of teachers at a teachers meeting or something. And so you're trying to focus on a bunch of different things. Somebody's saying something really important. You're trying to focus on what they're saying. It's at the end of the day, most teacher meetings, right? So you really don't feel like listening. And it's difficult to make yourself stay at that level 3. That's when you practice, because that's when you start getting your brain used to listening at that different level. Okay. Also, I want to tell you, you want to practice this kind of stuff in your personal life, because we call this low stakes practice. I really think we should probably stop doing that, because quite frankly, people's personal lives sometimes are not exactly low stakes for some of us. Okay. You got something going on at home. That is not low stakes. That's high stakes. We call it low stakes practice because it's not a $10 million deal that's on the table. Okay. That's why we call it low stakes. Honestly, if you can take this stuff and use it, and if you can practice this tactical empathy and turn on these listening ears, when you're dealing with someone at home, when there's emotion involved in that conversation, it gets that much easier when you start using this stuff outside of your home, when you don't have quite as much emotion involved. So the emotion sometimes can drain you a little bit more. So if you practice there and you get used to that kind of overwhelming feeling that you have when you're dealing with emotional issues at home, that emotion when you're outside of your house is different. It's not as personal. Therefore, the skills actually come to you a little bit easier because you've practiced them where it's actually harder. So when you leave your house, it's actually easier to use on somebody else because you're not emotionally tied to them. So just keep that in mind. And you can use this stuff anywhere. I highly advocate using it with the cashier at the grocery store because they're the most overlooked people in the world. Let's be honest. No one ever talks to them. You watch the person in front of you, they go up, they sit there, they're looking at the phone, they're not even paying attention to what the person is doing. And then they say, they look up and they realize, oh, you're done. So they start paying, they grab their receipt and they walk out. Half the time they don't even acknowledge that there's actually a person there. So when you see that, I promise you, just be ready to have a little bit of time. Don't do it when you're only buying one or two things because you won't be able to get away that quick. So when they're pulling their stuff through, you can say, wow, it seems like you guys are really busy today. That's a very simple label. And I remember the first time I did this, the cashier went like, talking to me because no one ever talks to them. So then they realized I was talking to them and I was like, yeah. And so she goes, yeah, we are kind of busy today. And I said, wow, looks like you might not even get a break, huh? And she said, I know, right? I was supposed to go to lunch an hour ago. Then she was off and I couldn't get her to stop. She just kept talking after that. And I found it refreshing because I didn't have to try that hard. I made a couple of labels. I talked to a person who's not used to ever getting acknowledged, and she just like was so excited to have someone actually care to ask her a question or talk to her in any way, shape, or form that she just word vomited all over me. And it was interesting. And I found that I know the history of a lot of the people at my grocery store because I try to go to different cashiers each time and get different stories from each one of them. And it's actually extremely good practice. Okay. Don, do you want to?
Just that, and you've kind of alluded to this, but this is not a skill that you can turn on and off. It is, well, you can. It is not a skill you can turn on and be good at if you haven't done it in the ways that Sandy's talking about. If you make it part of your everyday conversation, a new communication style, you'll be able to have these meetings that are, fraught with emotion. There's disagreement. Maybe there's a ton of people in the room, and you'll not be able to navigate well if you haven't done the work to start, if you haven't done the practice to start. And it'll save you time and money even in the short term, because that same cashier that Sandy's talking about is the cashier that will suddenly remember that there's a friends and family coupon that she can scan because you made her feel good.
Yes,
So it's worthwhile to practice.
absolutely. When people feel so good at the end of a conversation with you, they want to do things for you. They feel obligated to return the good favor. And just what you said, Don, I've had several times when they said, oh, I noticed you bought this. I have this coupon here. You mind if I use it? I'm like, no, feel free, and they do that for you because you make them feel good. Okay. Never underestimate the power of making someone that you're talking to feel really good just in the moment, because it doesn't happen that much, quite frankly. So when you do it, it does pay dividends. It really does. And not to mention, you're just making someone's day, really. I mean, that might have been the only conversation that person had all day because people are rude and they go through the line. They just expect you to check them out, take their receipt, and they're gone. So, using things like that to practice is huge. I have so many different directions I could go in right now, Dom, that I'm not sure which way to go. So should we do some laws of negotiation gravity or should we do?
Would y'all be against me saying one thing?
No.
It's just because I'm in the chat. Hi, everybody. I'm Michaela. I work with the wonderful Sandy and Dawn and work with Karen on the side on some other things. But one thing everyone in the chat keeps asking and talking about is really about how am I supposed to do all of this at once? Like all of these things going on. I can't emphasize enough how much practice is important. I think Sandy and Karen, I think Karen had to go to a hair show one weekend and all she was able to do was mirror and label people. And she did that all weekend to get her reps in. So I highly suggest you guys go to our YouTube channel and kind of see and listen to how some of our methodology and skills land so that you can start using it in your personal life. Some things Black Swan is we record ourselves talking and with inflection and tone and all of that just to hear how it comes off. So practice, practice, practice. Like Dawn said, you're not going to just flip a switch and be good at this. I've been here for almost 3 years and I could not be farther from not being the best. So practice.
And if I could share something, when I first started training with Black Swan and then doing personal coaching, which I recommend for all of you, we walk through this world sort of numb, right? We walk through with our eyes closed, right? And you literally can do that. And we've gotten so obsessed with this thing that we don't recognize anybody else. And so when I'm working on the skills, which is every day because I need them, you have to think about it. And so many things in our life have become rote, whether we're a diagnostician or a principal or an advocate or an attorney. And it's very exciting, but it was really irritating and hard because I've been writing with my right hand for 57 years. And Sandy said, stop that. And then Don said, stop it right now. I was like, but no, I write with my right hand. But what it's taught me has been a game changer and a way to connect with others that I wasn't doing. And so these skills are invaluable.
And I'm going to share a little bit more about Karen too. Karen, when she first started coming to our events and she first started going through coaching, she had a hard time. And part of the reason is because Karen is what we call an assertive. And I'm an assertive too. So I knew exactly where she was coming from, because it is something that if you have an assertive personality, this stuff can be a little bit harder for you because your instinct is to go sarcastic or have a smart remark. And instead of doing that, you have to pause for a second, take time to listen to what's happening on the other side before you react. There's a big difference between reacting and responding. And a lot of times what helps that a little bit is a couple of seconds of silence. Okay. What is it that Derek says? Say something in the heat of the moment or when you're in an angry mood, and it'll be the best speech you ever regret.
Yes.
Yes. So you need to think about things before they come out of your mouth. Okay. And so what we did with Karen was we just got her to slow down. I mean, her mind works a million miles an hour, and that's typical for an assertive woman because I'm the same way. And that's how I talk really fast too, because everything goes for me like this, like I'm going a million miles an hour all the time. In order to make this stuff work for you, you have to slow down. As soon as you relax and stop putting that pressure on yourself to be up here, it actually gets easier. So calm down, slow down, take time to process what people are saying. There is nothing wrong with silence. Okay. Silence, it can be your best friend. It can be used to take care of a lot of different things. And we're going to specifically go into silence as actually one of our core skills. Believe it or not, it's actually really hard. Go try to be silent sometimes when you're trying to do something and you really want to say something, but you have to be quiet. It's not that easy. So we're going to get more into that. But Karen, during her coaching sessions, I'll never forget, session 3 out of 4, she comes in and she goes, I went to a dog show. And Don and I were like, okay. And she started doing, and all of a sudden she had this epiphany. I saw it. It's like the light came on her eyes and she was like, oh my God, I get it. And it just clicked. So what's going to happen is you're going to be using this. You're just going to keep working, because you have no neural pathway paved for this stuff. It's all counterintuitive at this point. For all of us, when we learn it at first, it's like, this makes no sense. This makes no sense. This makes no sense. How you make that form is by practicing, because it takes 64 to 67 repetitions of any one of our skills to even start becoming a habit. And that just means your brain is going, I see you doing something there. It doesn't mean they get it. It just means your brain sees that you're doing something different and it's catching on a little bit. The more you practice, the more you pave that neural pathway. When that neural pathway gets paved really well, that's when you're going to be able to do this. That's when you're going to have that epiphany. Okay, that's the moment that Karen was like, oh my God, I get it. And it does. It happens suddenly. Okay, it comes across and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what you've been telling me. This is what you've been talking about. I finally see it. It all came together. And that's probably, and Don, I'm sure you've seen it too. When you're coaching somebody, that's probably like the coolest moment when you see that, because it's just kind of like, there it is. We got it.
Yeah, and that's why as you go through this, if you dedicate yourself to it, if you commit to it, remember to carve out a couple of minutes a month to practice your poker face, because you'll have one of those aha moments in a meeting that where you've been trying to get this through to them for however long, and all of a sudden you set back and start using the skills, and they they give you stuff you didn't even know was on the table, and you have to be very careful about spiking the football, running in a circle around your chair, and saying something like,
Yep.
you know, because they're going to feel that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Speaking of that,
remember, this is long-term relationships.
yes, you don't
Yeah.
want to celebrate too soon. But also what I want you to remember is I told you that you're picking up 20 million bits of information from the other side. Also remember that everything you do, they're picking up on it because they're also picking up 20 million bits of information, which is why if you're using our stuff to manipulate, they feel it because they're picking up that stuff. Also, because I know this is going to come up, when you first start using this stuff, you're going to feel awkward. And then you're automatically going to think that people know you're doing something different. It's your own paranoia because what it is you feel awkward. They're picking up on your awkwardness. They're not picking up on the skills that you're using. They're picking up on the fact that you feel very awkward doing what you're doing because it's new to you. So they're just kind of looking at you because they don't understand what is happening here because you're going like this. Seems like you have a reason for saying that. Like, see if it's working. And they're going, what is wrong with you? So it's not that they're picking up that you're using the skills or that you're doing anything different. They're picking up on your own awkwardness. So one of the things you have to work on is kind of using the skills without fear. Just kind of throwing it out there and just kind of being like, seems like I have a reason for saying that. Like, you have to practice that confident feeling when you're using the skills because the awkwardness is what they're picking up on. And don't let yourself be worried about getting something wrong. If you get it wrong, they're going to correct you. And that's what you want, quite frankly, because if you say something wrong, if you label something that someone is thinking or feeling wrong, they're just going to look at you and say, no, not really. I was thinking about this way. And then they start telling you this whole thing and they give you the most honest, candid information you will ever get when they correct you because the urge to correct is irresistible. People cannot wait to tell you how wrong you got it. People love pointing out the mistakes that other people make. And in doing that, they give you the best information that you're going to get. So all you have to do is remember that when you get it wrong and they go to correct you, do not react to that. Okay? Get giddy. Because if you get all incensed because they're telling you that you were wrong, you're missing the boat here because the big thing is they're telling you that you're wrong and they're giving you information. So you should just kind of go, here we go. I got it wrong. Look at this now. Write this down. This is all true, good information. People do not correct you with a lie. They correct you with the truth. So it's going to be the best information you get.
Sandy, I sorry to interrupt. To
No.
just bring that in, someone had asked, and this question's coming up, and we always get this question. One of the questions is, how do you do this when you have a narcissistic person, when you have someone who's an assertive? So if we want to, Karen, if we want to go into that area and stuff, we did have some questions about people with dementia, and I've never heard anyone ask about that before. So if we want to go into that.
That can be tricky. The dementia thing, I don't think we've done a lot of work and study on that because a lot of our stuff is based in neuroscience. And when you're talking about someone who has dementia, all their neurochemicals and stuff that are going on are not in the right way right now. So that's a good question, really. I think we should probably look into that.
I would say that one of the things that these skills are really, really good at is diffusing negative emotions and fear. And dementia patients, empathy actually was pointed out clear back in like 1913. The word didn't even start getting used in America until the early 1900s. Sympathy was used, not empathy.
Yes.
When empathy was really studied by a psychiatrist, he dealt with people with severe mental illness, delusions, schizophrenia, all kinds of things. And even in delusional patients, his study, such as it was back then, indicated that if you didn't use empathy, you were really missing a lot because these people, you can't argue logic to somebody with dementia, with somebody with some sort of delusion or anything like that. And I know the two are different. I'm not comparing them, but with dementia especially, remember that a lot of their behavior is based on fear because they don't remember the things are unfamiliar to them. They think things that aren't true. So there's a fear there. And while I don't think we've studied it, I would, if I were in that situation, I would try out the skills and see if you couldn't use curiosity to diffuse a little bit of their fear and help with your communication.
Well, and that makes perfect sense because one of our our number one law of negotiation gravity is fear is the single biggest driver of human decision making and behavior. So when you're going through dementia, you fear a lot of different things because you're losing things, right? You're losing things. You can't keep up with things. It scares you because all of a sudden you realize you can't remember basic things. So you're dealing with someone who is sitting with the fear. So if you use labels, if you use mirrors, instead of asking questions, you're going to be able to get somewhere with them. And the reason I say that is because when you ask someone a question, when you throw a question out there, they have a chance to filter it. So if you ask just, hey, what are you going to do about this? Or whatever you're going to ask them, if you ask them a question, a filter automatically goes up because they're thinking, why are you asking me this question? What information do I really want to give you? And they filter it. To stop that filter from coming up, you use a label instead. Seems like you have a reason for doing that. Instead of saying, why are you doing that? And they'll put that filter up, that defense, just say, seems like you have a reason for doing that in a nice tone of voice. And they won't even think about it because you didn't use a question buzzword. So it doesn't land in their brain that way. So what they do instead is they just start giving you information because you did it with an upward inflection, which implies that you want them to return the information that you're seeking. And once you do that and they start talking, it's almost like a stream of conscious kind of thing. It's like they just start talking and they're giving you information because you're not asking them questions. It works. Think about your teenagers. Okay. You ask them a question. They don't want to answer you. Hey, how was your day? Good. What'd you do? Nothing. That's famous last words of every teenager I've ever heard of. So don't even go there. Just stop using questions. Instead, just say, when they come in the house at the end of the day, when you see them going and they're rooting all around, you can say, oh, it seems like today was a really rough day. No question. And they'll go, yeah, because you didn't ask a question. So you're not, invading them or interrogating them or busting up their autonomy. You're basically just making an observation, because that's what a label is, a verbal observation. You're just labeling what you see when they come in the door. Seems like today was a rough one. And they'll go, yeah. And they'll start talking. And then when they start talking, a label and mirror, right after that, they're just going to keep talking. I've had several coaching clients tell me, thanks for that, because now I can't get my kid to shut up because they stopped asking questions. Because when you're dealing with somebody, especially between the ages of like 12 and 25, they're searching for themselves. They don't want you to interrogate them because at that age, you know everything. Remember, don't you remember how you knew everything when you were a teenager? You know it all. So when you interrogate them, they have a bad reaction to it. Use a label. So I would imagine it's the same when you're dealing with people with dementia. Just be calm, low and slow tone of voice. Use labels. Don't ask questions, because when you ask questions, you're going to make them feel worse because they already can't remember things. And when you hit them with a question, it's not only a filter that's going to happen, it's going to be another fear that comes up because they can't answer what you said because they don't even remember what you're talking about. Don?
Yeah, a question has a wrong answer, and they feel that,
Yes.
and they don't want to get it wrong, even though their truth they might realize that their truth is the wrong answer. If they think it's a different decade, if they don't remember what house they're living in, and you ask them, where do you think they're at? They know there's a wrong answer to that.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
That
So,
exacerbates the fear that they feel, which makes it even harder for them to then calm down and have any kind of interaction with you. So, well, let's deal with the assertive people thing, because, I'm assertive. Karen's assertive. Poor Don is an analyst. And Don's getting used to dealing with me all the time because we're working together a lot and I'm assertive. So assertive people scare the hell out of people. They really do, because someone who is assertive can come at you, confident and strong, and they make people nervous. It can be intimidating. And, if you're a woman and you have that kind of attitude, the B word has landed on me several times, and it's a lot to do with my assertion. I'm not going to speak for Karen, but I'm just saying for me, also being in law enforcement, because it's another little level of power there that just makes people want to call you even more bad names. So when you're dealing with someone who is an assertive, the very simple way to deal with them is let them talk. Just let them talk. They want to talk. If you go quiet, they will fill it with whatever they want to say, because if you're talking with someone, if you're having a conversation with someone who is assertive and you go silent, they're going to go, oh, you're being quiet. It must be time for me to talk. And they're just going to start talking, which is good for you because you're getting information. Remember, in any interaction, The more you're talking, the more information you're giving away. The more you're listening, the more information you're gathering. So if you're one of those people who feels like you're in control of a conversation when you're the one doing the talking, that is completely false. When you're the one doing the talking, you're giving all the information away and you're not gathering anything because you're the one talking. So the key is to listen more than you talk, and you can start judging that in your conversations, and you can realize if you're somebody who talks way too much. Practice being quiet for a little bit, because then you're going to hear what other people have to say. That's how you're going to gather information. Okay. Also, narcissistic people have huge egos. Okay. They have huge egos. And people disagree with me about this all the time, but I'm telling you right now, if you do this, it will work. If you're dealing with someone with a big ego, feed that ego. You feed it. They're easier to deal with when they feel really good about themselves. And when you feed their ego, they feel really good. So don't try to argue with them. If you try to argue with their ego at all, it's just going to turn into a fight, and you're not going to get anywhere. It's going to ruin the conversation. You're not going to make any progress on anything. So just feed the ego. Just feed it. Don?
Stay curious, because one of the things that I see over and over is people will label somebody a narcissist because they just aren't getting it, because they don't like dealing with them.
Yep.
And so their response isn't, I need to listen better and figure out what way I can get going forward. It is, that person's a narcissist and they're impossible to deal with. And when you do that, when you make that assumption, you might very well be right, but you start negotiating with yourself, because that's an excuse for you not to put the effort in. I'm just saying that because that's how I did that for a very long time, where instead of confronting the issue through genuine curiosity, I would just label somebody as impossible to deal with, and I plant my feet, and that was as far as we went.
And you make a really good point there, because you're not always going to like the people that you're sitting around that table with. You're not always going to want to listen to the people that you're sitting around that table with. The thing you have to do is calm down, take a deep breath, and realize that if you listen to them, if you label them, if you stay curious about what's going on with them, you're going to get more information, and you're going to get further if you just let them talk than you are if you try to interrupt them constantly to go back to your own thing that you want to have done. Okay. The thing is, people who are assertive, people who are narcissists, people who have huge egos freak people out a little bit. They don't want to deal with them. They're not fun to deal with. You know, they think about themselves a lot. They bully you around a little bit. And so it gets really annoying. But if you can learn how to just take a deep breath, listen and stay curious about what they're thinking and where it's coming from, and do a couple of labels that demonstrate that you understand what they're thinking and where it's coming from, they'll feel so good in the moment that they'll be quiet for a few minutes, because you get them. So you must be a great person. Now they can listen to you because you understand them. That's all they need. They need to feel heard and understood, just like everybody else. Okay. The thing about assertives is they do like to talk, and it's good when they're talking because you're getting information. But if you want to get information that means something to you, listen to what they're saying as soon as they breathe, because everyone has to take a breath at some point. As soon as they breathe, you throw a mirror out there and you send them off to what you want them to talk about. That's how you handle them. It's not necessarily handling them so much, but you're basically letting them tell you what you want to know. And you're not interrupting them. You're just mirroring them. And it doesn't matter, because with a mirror, you're repeating words that they said. So you're saying, even if it's 5 sentences ago, you're mirroring something that they said. So it's not going to be a thought pattern interrupt. It's basically going to be, oh, you want to hear me talk about that now? Okay. And they're going to go this way. It's not a big deal. So don't let assertive people scare you. They're actually the easiest ones to deal with because they're the most predictable.
That's what I was going to say. Not for nothing, but assertive people are great because we're all very transactional when we talk very often. So I'll say something and you'll, like Sandy said earlier, you'll listen to rebut and you'll, yeah, but, and you'll go right back at it. Assertives, when they go into a lot of these difficult conversations, they're ready to go. They got all their arguments set up. They got everything they're going to tell you and they're going to convince you of, and you are going this way. They got it all figured out. And so they're ready with all those defenses. They're in that fighting stance, verbally speaking. And when you come at them, instead of with an argument or an observation that they don't like, you label them, and we're going to get into what labels are in a minute, but you label them and start listening to them. Now it lands with them that they don't have to defend their side because you're exploring their side. So you're obviously, now you're walking together down the same path.
Yep.
And it's not that they don't have defenses for that. They don't feel like they need to defend against that because you're going their way is in their mind. And it's so much fun with truly like if they are truly narcissistic or just very assertive, it's so much fun with them because they go so quick if you just trust the process. I hate
Yep.
to smile at that, but it is so much fun to watch an assertive person who comes in and they're all ready, and you do a couple of little things, and all of a sudden you're the greatest person in the room because you listened, you got it right away. They didn't even have to
Yep.
fight it.
Yep.
You're on their side, and they love that.
Yeah. If you demonstrate to them that they don't have to fight you on it because you're going to let them talk, you're golden with them. No problem. All right. So Don, do you want to get into labels?
Do we want
Yeah,
to
I
talk
wanna-
about sorry, Karen. We want to
Oh,
talk
go
about
ahead.
the 3 different assertive,
Oh, you want to do
other-
personality types? Okay, we can do that first. We'll do it real quick because I want them to get at least labels tonight. So, there are 3 negotiator conflict personality types that we deal with at the Black Swan Group. One of them is obviously assertive because you've heard us talk about Karen and I are being assertives. There's analyst. That's what Don is. Don is an analyst. And then there's what we call the accommodator. Now, analyst and assertive are 2 sides of the same coin. So it's like they are the worst type match together because they are opposite sides of the same coin. So sometimes assertives just want to be blunt and get stuff done and come on. And an analyst doesn't go fast through anything because they like to have all the data, all the information. If you love Excel spreadsheets, you're most likely an analyst at heart. They like data and information. More information you can give them, the better. Okay. If you go quiet on an analyst, they're in heaven because they need that quiet to think. It gives them time to process. If you know who Lex Friedman is, Lex Friedman did an interview with Elon Musk. If you're aware of this interview, it's been a while ago now, but it's my favorite thing to reference because it just sends home exactly what it means to be an analyst. Elon Musk, full on analyst. Lex Friedman asked him a question and he went like this. Legitimately thinking what his answer was going to be. Lex Friedman let him go for 22 seconds. That is a terminally long time. If you're an assertive, that's like, oh my God, just kill me now. I can't wait 22 seconds. Just what is your problem? But Lex Friedman did an awesome job because he recognized what was happening. He recognized that Elon Musk was actually thinking about it and formulating an answer. And 22 seconds later, he comes out with this eloquent, lovely answer and answered the question full out. No room for any question over what he was trying to say. He just answered it beautifully. That's what an analyst needs. An analyst needs time and silence to be able to think about what they're going to say and what they're going to do because they do not want to give you the wrong answer. So a lot of times when you ask them a question, they won't answer you right away. They'll want a night to think about it. They don't want to commit to anything. They want a night to think about it because as an analyst, they need to look at all the details and make sure that it's the right move to make. And they don't like to be pushed to answer questions either because they want to make sure that they've looked at everything and have the right answer. So you can't push an analyst like that. You've got to give them time. You've got to give them silence so they can think. And you've got to be organized. Last thing you want to do is go into a conversation with an analyst and not be organized with what's happening because they're going to be like, you're not even organized. You know, it drives them nuts. So you don't want to do that. If you go silent on assertive, already said this, they're just going to start talking. Now, the accommodator is a whole different animal. The accommodator, if you go silent on them, it's literally like the silent treatment. Okay. They silence makes them paranoid. They can deal with it for a couple of seconds, but if you stay silent too long, they start having thoughts through their head. What's going on? Are they mad at me? What's happening? Why are they being quiet? What's happening here? Because the most important thing to an accommodator is the relationship in the moment. So the relationship in the moment is what matters the most to them. And they feel like if you're giving them the silent treatment, that somehow the relationship has been damaged in the moment and they don't know what to do because they need it to be fixed. So be careful when you go silent. If you don't know who you're dealing with on the other side of the table, if you go silent on an accommodator and you see all this stuff start happening here, don't let that sit, because it's negative emotions. And when the negative emotions get spiraling up, there's not a whole lot you can do to reel them back. So you need to stop it as soon as you realize what's happening. If you go silent on somebody and they just kind of go, that's an analyst, let them think. If you interrupt them, you're going to cause a thought pattern interrupt. So just let them think, okay? And assertive, you're not going to have to worry about it, because if you go silent, they're going to start talking. So that's not a big deal. The 3 personality types, it's kind of where you go when your back's against the wall. When the stuff hits the fan and you've got skin in the game, how are you going to react? That's your negotiator conflict personality type. Now, all of us are all of them at any given moment. I could not survive in life if I was assertive 99.99, probably 80% of the time. If I was assertive that much, I would not get anything accomplished, because I would be difficult. Okay. I'm difficult enough as it is. But look, don't you nod your head, Don. We have to work together soon. But we are all any of these things at any given moment. You can bounce back and forth between them. Okay. But when it's going wrong, what's your go-to going to be? If you're in a bar and someone comes up and punches you, what's going to be your response? If you're an assertive, you're going to go, oh, hell no. And you're going to punch back, because that's what you do. If you're an analyst, you're going to go, what was that for? You know, what? I don't have time for this. That's more what an analyst thinks. If you're in a comedy, you're going to go, ow, why did you hit me? Because you're worried about the relationship. So it's how you feel when it goes wrong. Now, the bear story is probably the easiest way to do this, because that's how everybody can most like figure out how they are. So we'll do this really quick. We're going on a hike in the woods, and we're on this path. We're going down this path and we come across a bear. First personality type is going to pull out the knife that they always carry with them. And they're going to go, all right, Mr. Bear, we're going to fight. I'm probably going to die, but you're going to know you were in a fight. That's number 1. Number 2, same path, same bear. They pull out their phone and go, all right, well, there is a path 5 yards back. And I know that because I found it yesterday when I knew I was going on this hike, just in case there was an emergency. So I go down the path and there's a deer stand there, because I knew something like this was going to happen. There's a sniper rifle in the deer stand, because I like to be prepared. And you're going to shoot the bear from a distance and then go on your way. That's number 2. Then there's the third type. Same path, same bear, and they go, oh, Mr. Bear. Oh, look, it's a bear. You run up and you hug Mr. Bear and you go, Mr. Bear, I know what's wrong. Nobody loved you as a cub. Come on, I'm going to take you home. I'm going to have dinner with the family. It's going to be great. You take the bear home, you sit him down, they have dinner, everything is fine, until the bear makes a mistake. And then the bear becomes a rug, because that third personality type, they can take a lot. And they will take a lot, because the relationships are that important to them. But if you push them too far, they will make you a rug. They're the most dangerous type. So if you're the one that would be very nice to the bear and go up and try to befriend the bear, that's not a negative thing for you. Okay. You're where you're supposed to be, because in 80 to 85% of any given conversation, you should be in that accommodator mindset, using that accommodator tone of voice. So if you're there, that's good for you. All right. Because that's where you need to be. Because if we push you too far, you will make us a rug. That's the thing. That's why you're so dangerous, because you're good until you're not. And then it's like, whoa, what just happened? Assertives, they're pretty much like that all the time. So you can pretty much read them. This is easy to get by with. And an analyst, just make sure, give them an Excel spreadsheet. They'll be happy forever.
I do not like Excel spreadsheets, to be clear.
But you're still an analyst.
I am an analyst. Just know that with every personality type, it's not all, and Sandy said this, but it's not all that you are. Everybody's a little bit, there are some assertives that like they have it on all of the time. And there's a lot of assertives who are down in the middle, where during a conflict, they solve it with assertiveness. That's just what they do. And it's the same with analysts. For the longest time, I thought I was an accommodator. When I was asked, when I joined the Black Swan Group, I thought I was an accommodator, because for years, I worked out in the country when I was a cop up in Idaho, and I could sell people magazine subscriptions by the time I got them to jail. I was good at it. And it was because I was accommodating. I was friendly. I was decent to them. And when I took the quiz that we have a quiz online for the personality type. When I found out that I was an analyst, it made a lot of sense because everything I did because the information said that was the way to make it work. And so know that no matter what personality type you are, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Every personality type is necessary but inadequate to go through any kind of life, anything. So you're going to pull from the accommodator side when you need to. If you're good at this, you're going to pull from the analyst side when you need to. And you can be assertive, not an assertive voice tone, but you can do assertive things so long as you bring tactical empathy first.
Yeah.
And relieve that tension. So you can get your way even if you're an assertive. You have to watch your voice tone because that's what people hear and react to emotionally first.
Mm-hmm. And that tends to be where assertives have the most trouble, especially full-on assertives, because we like sarcasm and we like using humor, and sometimes the humor is not appropriate humor, and it can. So yeah, if you're an assertive, just know that your lift is a little bit higher to make sure that you don't use that assertiveness to get what you want, because that's no way to be. If you use assertiveness to get what you want, eventually that relationship will fall apart because they're going to go, you know what? I had to do it this time because I made that agreement, but I'm not working with you anymore. And that's how it goes. So you don't want to scare people away with that assertiveness. Michaela?
I sent the link to Alicia, if she'll share it with everybody, to our website, and there's a downloadable thing on there, that a PDF that goes through the 3 different personality types, and then you can also take the quiz to see what personality type you are. So maybe the next time we get Sandy and Dawn on, instead of talking about where you are, we start off with what personality type you are.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Would you be against me hitting labels real quick for just a
Go
couple
ahead.
minutes so people know what they are? Okay, so we've been talking a lot about labeling stuff, and it's one of 9 skills in our negotiation 9. It is one of our top 3 skills for the fastest way to get to the unknown unknowns, and it's going to unlock a lot of things for you. Now, you'll come down in 2 camps. Our quick 2+1, we call it, is our top 3 skills, which are labels, mirrors, and dynamic silence. And dynamic silence you're going to use after every one of our skills. I'm going to talk about labels today, and just know that if you take this and you don't like it, if you're really, really awkward with it, that's what you need to practice. What you'll find is when you learn about mirrors, you'll be in one camp or the other. You'll either really like mirrors and really dislike labels, or you dislike mirrors and really have fun with labels. You have to practice them so you can master them both. But for labels, here's what a label is. And Sandy has said this already. It's a verbal observation of the dynamic or the circumstance or the emotion you're getting from the other side. It's what your intuition is telling you, that 20 million bits of information per second that your subconscious mind is thrown out there. So what we want to do with labels is get into those latent things. A lot of times the things they're not saying. You can label surface things, emotions, and you'll still get good stuff from that. But people will, when you get good at labels, there are people you will talk to who will think you can read their mind, because you'll observe things about them and spit it out in the form of a label, and they will have no idea where that came from, but you are the new magic in their lives because you've got that done. So how do we do a label? Well, it has a structure, and for the basic structure, remember these words. It seems like, it looks like, it feels like, it sounds like. You use it instead of you at first when you're practicing these. It seems like you're uncomfortable with this. And so your structure is always going to be one of those 4 things. And some people tend towards one or the other, depending on how they learn. Maybe they're a visual learner, so they say it looks like a lot. Mix them up. Don't always say it seems like, because it just sounds kind of robotic. But like Sandy said, these verbal observations take the place of questions. So you don't have to any question that you have, whether it is, why are you doing that? When you ask somebody a question, again, there are wrong answers to questions. They're going to defend their position. It lands different in their mind than a verbal observation. And Sandy gave this one earlier, and it's one that we use all the time. And I would encourage you to look over the YouTube channel, the Edge newsletter, all the stuff on our website, and then make a list of labels that are going to work for you in your space, whatever it is that you do. But one of the ones you got to write down is, it seems like you have a reason for, or it sounds like you have a reason for. And then after that is whatever they're doing. It sounds like you have a reason for asking that. It sounds like you have a reason for feeling that way. It seems like you have a reason for doing that. And saying that, any of those things, when you are unsure of the motivation, or you just want to test the motivation of something you don't really like that you heard, instead of respond or reacting back quickly, take a breath in that space between the trigger, because you're going to get triggered. Your mind just does that. We're all human. And your response is that time for you to label that out. It seems like you have a reason for thinking that. And if it's something you don't like, that label will serve you in so many different kinds of conversations. If somebody comes up to you and says, hey, do you have a few minutes? Well, maybe, but it depends entirely on the information you're about to give me, because I may not want to spend my few minutes with you. So if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, do you have a few minutes? Or, hey, don't you still own a pickup truck? I'm not helping you move. So instead of any of that immediate reaction, you give them a label. It seems like you have a reason for asking that. Do an upward inflection at the end. And while there's no question buzzword in there, that little inflection lets them know you're asking for more information. And it gets you away from questions. One of the things that Sandy didn't talk about, analysts, and this is how I knew I was an analyst when I found out, is we don't like direct questions. Now, it doesn't mean that direct questions make us mad. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that when you ask me a question, I feel challenged, more so probably than the other personality types. It feels like you're challenging my information. It seems like you're putting me on the spot for my preparation. I don't like questions. I didn't realize how much I didn't like them until I found out I was an analyst. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. If people labeled me all day, I'd be perfectly happy. And know that these skills, like labels especially, and Sandy talked about this too. Sandy's a genius, if you're wondering. But she talked about this earlier, and that is, people are going to feel like you're doing something different. They're going to feel your awkwardness. If they're very close to you, if they're family members, they're going to ask, why are you talking this way? And don't hide it. When I started in as a hostage negotiator, of course, every conversation I had with my wife, when she had an edged weapon in her hand, cooking or whatever, she don't you negotiate with me. And same with Black Swan. Don't you try to Black Swan me. And I told her, what I'm doing here is I don't listen well, and I need to listen to you better. So I'm using some skills that I'm learning. I'm trying to get better at them so I can listen to you better. And I'm telling you, I'm golden. I can do labels and mirrors and dynamic silence all I want, because she gets to talk. So structure your labels. Like I said, it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like, it feels like. As you get better with them, or if you really want to dial into the person that you're talking to, throw out a you, but just watch your tone of voice. You seem like you're angry, or you seem like that meeting didn't go the way you'd hoped. That'll dial down into them. It makes it more personal for them. What a label is not, don't say, and a lot of social workers, you'll hear them say this, what I'm hearing is, that's not a label, because you're making it about you. If you observe them and say, it seems like, and you add to that, what to avoid also, don't use labels to try to drive your conversation or prove a point. And I was guilty of this at first too. I would try to prove a point in a snarky way by labeling something obvious. And that's bad, because you're not making it about the other side. You're not genuinely curious. The other thing is, avoid the words and, or, because, or but within your labels. If I label you out of genuine curiosity and say, it seems like you don't trust me, or it sounds like that isn't something that you want to pursue, and I stop there, you get to talk. You get to explain yourself. You get to feel good about giving me the information. If instead I say, it seems like you don't trust me, but I assure you, you can. Everything before the but got erased. It's an erasing word. However, is the same way. It just erased everything you did. You stepped on your label. If you say, it seems like you don't trust me, and it feels like blah blah blah. Now you're extending your label out, and you're not giving your counterpart any ability for that to land and for them to give back to you what the information that you need. So, and or but or because, just leave those out. Practice leaving out but in most of your conversations, whether it's a label or not, because again, it erases, it starts you explaining. And while I know it was in the chat earlier, it said, if you're explaining, you're losing. The reality is, if you're explaining too early, you're losing. You'll get your chance to explain, but use these labels. And again, don't overuse them, because people will feel that. But labels feel really, really good to people. And like I said, it'll make you seem like a mind reader. I wanted to see if there was anything else that I needed to cover with that. But just know that with labels, they're by far my favorite. They always have been. I had to practice mirrors, but wow, the information you can give, and the stuff that you can stop. I had and I'll tell this story real quick because it might help you in one of your meetings, though I doubt you'll ever be charged by a raving lunatic. When I first promoted, I was the same fat gray-haired sergeant. I'm not a sergeant anymore, but I was standing on a it's not proper to call it a lawn in Las Vegas because it's all rocks and prickly pears and stuff. But there I was standing on the sidewalk. We were on a domestic. The female was out. The male was still inside. He'd been drinking. He was pretty violent. And I had two brand new cops with me. Neither one of them had even eaten a donut. They're like health nuts, couldn't shave. It's crazy. But I digress. Anyway, out the door comes bad guy, and he is mad, and he is pointing at us, and he's spitting as he talks, and he's going off. And of course, the new guys, they're grabbing for tasers, and they tried their best black swan skill, which was calm down, sir, which never helps. That's like throwing dynamite in the room. So as he's charging across the lawn, the grass, the rocks, I said, in a calm kind of analyst tone, I said, it seems like this has been building up for quite a while. And then I was quiet. And as drunk as he was, it stopped him walking. He was still mad. He was still yelling. But now he was yelling about how it had built up, how nobody seemed to understand that this wasn't just tonight. And he stood in place and threw all that out there. And it was all because that label made it about him, and he wanted to explain, but he didn't think we were going to listen, just like the times before. So he was trying to just pound it home as he walked toward us. And when I gave him the chance, he stopped and gave me a lot of good information. And we wound up with no use of force on that. And I'm not saying, again, in your meetings that that's probably something that you're going to have, but it is very easy in those meetings for somebody to get truly angry. And when they do, that's a great label. It seems like this is causing you a lot of stress you don't need. It feels like you're under a lot of pressure here. And if you're genuine about it, because you want to know what's on the other side, you're going to get black swans. They're going to tell you stuff that maybe they're not supposed to tell you. They're going to tell you stuff that you couldn't have imagined was a motivation for why they're being hard-headed on a certain thing. And it's going to change everything going forward. And you never get there with questions, because with a question, you're narrowing their focus, and with a label, you're just letting them talk. So as you practice these, you are going to, I hope that each one of you gets that magic, because it truly is, it's a game changer, and it'll save you money when you're in the store. Like I said, it will make things go faster, even though we feel like it's going slower because we're taking all this time to listen. You're smoothing over obstacles that are never going to present because you weren't arguing, you were labeling. Did I miss anything, Sandy?
No, I think you're good. I think the question that comes up sometimes is they understand what a label is. They have problems figuring out what to label. So I want to give you kind of a picture to keep in your mind. So we use this in our live events. There's a picture of an iceberg. So you can label the stuff that's on the surface. You can label the things that you see, their anger, their, whatever they're presenting with. That's what's above the surface. What you're looking to get to is the stuff that's underneath. You don't know how much iceberg there is under there. You don't know how big it is. You don't know how it's shaped. You don't know anything about it. But that's what we call the latent dynamics, the things that are the why behind. Okay. Those are the things you're trying to get to. You're trying to get to those deeper areas with the label. So you see what's at the top. How do you go from what you can see, what's presenting, to what's underneath, the latent dynamics? You stay curious. And we've said that so much, but curiosity is the key. It really is the key. Staying curious about what's happening on the other side is what's going to get you down to that deeper level. That's where you really want to be labeling. Now, it's okay to label surface if that's all you've got. But the key is when you label that surface, well, it seems like you're really angry today. They're going to talk a lot about, yes, I'm angry, blah. They're going to give you a lot of stuff. As they're giving you stuff, you're listening. You're full on focused on them. You're listening to what they're saying. You're picking it. I hear from here. I call it, I hear from my sternum, because when I let stuff soak in, I let it soak in right there and I feel some kind of way about it. And as soon as I feel a certain way about it, I label it. And that's what gets me deep. Don't think too much about it. Just go with your gut instinct, because your gut instinct is probably going to be right. And if it's not, it doesn't matter, because the person's going to say, no, I wasn't feeling that way. I'm actually feeling like this, but they're going to give you the right information. So never discount what your intuition is telling you, because it's probably closer than you think. And if you're just a little bit off, they're going to correct you and you're going to have all that good information.
And I want to bring up something Sandy said earlier in a thing we had earlier. One of the great things about these skills that people miss is when you go into a meeting and you have a certain goal in mind. One, never be so sure of what you want that you wouldn't take something better if it came along. But remember, when you're prepping for these, you're going to want to do a lot. You're going to want to remember your curiosity and stuff like that. But you're also going to want to make sure that whatever it is you're arguing for, whatever that point is that you just got to prove, don't talk about that. Because if that's a sticking point, there's a reason on the other side that it's a sticking point, and that's where we want to get. We want to move them off their X, is what Sandy said earlier, and it's absolutely true. If they say something in a meeting like, I don't think that this is necessary or that is necessary because we've had it in the past where blah 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 blah. Okay, what our reaction is we want to talk about our situation and why this is necessary. We want to discuss, in fact, what they just said. I'm going to ask you to do that little shift and start asking yourself again, why does this make sense to them? So then instead of saying, why isn't this necessary? You say when they're saying it isn't necessary, label it. It sounds like you've had some experience with similar situations. And what we're doing is we're moving them around this thing that they don't want to do and saying, why? Why is that important to you? Why does that make sense to you? And they get to talk. And as far as ego labels and things like that, very easy to slip in here. You say something like, it feels like you've had a lot of experience with this, or it seems like you've balanced this before, or even better, it seems like you're probably the only one that can get this right. Oh, they love that.
Huge, yeah.
They love it.
The
And it's
best
so
color.
damn funny. I did this just the other day. I have been trying to talk to a guy for years, quite literally. He'd be a great source for my law enforcement side. And I finally sent him an email and I used a form of that exact label. It seems like you're the only person that can get this solved. And I got a 2-page email the next day when he came in the office, and it was all glowing because it was all about wanting to meet with me, wanting to help with this, because all of a sudden, it's not that I want information from him. It is, he's the only one that can get this right. He's the only one solving it. And again with a poker face. It's a good thing it was over an email, because I was like, yes, finally. So yeah, I may have let out a squeal. That was an accusation that I got from the other room. That was not a squeal. It was a desk drawer. It needs oil. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and if I can just share something, a lot of us sit in these IEP meetings, they become rote, right? We have a child in special ed from 3 to 18, and we know what's coming, and we're talking about the law, we're talking about requirements. And even like when I'm getting ready to use a label in my head, I'm like, not going to work. And just because I've only been doing it for about a year, it worked every time. And literally, it seems like you have a reason for saying that. And not, it seems like you have a reason for saying that. That's not what they said to say. That's what I heard. I was like, I got this. It seems like you have a reason for being awful at IEP meetings. They didn't say that. But when you say, it seems like you have a reason for saying that, it literally, you're stepping down and gives them an opportunity. And it could be the same person that you've always dealt with, but the reason is different. And one of the best ones that Sandy taught me was, it seems like you really care about the kids in your school. I was like, I'm not going to say that. She's like, yes, you are. And they do, right? We all do care, right? We get in these meetings where we all love Billy, but it doesn't feel like that. And it really, and I have it written down in my paper before she even said it. When you're talking, you're giving away. And when you're listening, you're gathering. And so these are just, it's gold, gold, gold. Thanks you guys so much for being here and sharing this. I do want to open it up for some questions. I know the great Michaela and the great Alicia have been typing away. Yeah, emojis for the team. Thank you, Sandy and Dawn. So questions that you guys have, we certainly want to be able to address them. Alicia, do you want to read some questions?
There she is.
Would you like me to read some questions?
Why not?
Hey, you know what? I think I'm gonna read some questions. We have a few. Okay, so the first one is, if there are 14 to 15 people in the meeting, how do you get that person or person to connect to getting the mutual agreement? Like when school teams say no to a disability, but data proves otherwise, who do you connect with?
Andy?
So it's going to be important to know the person in the room that can make the things happen. And so, Karen, I think you'd be best to point out who that person is, depending on what the situation is. You want to kind of defer to them. It's almost like an ego thing, but you want to kind of say, it seems like you have a really good idea of what this situation calls for, and then let them say it. And then the thing is, it's going to depend on who the person is, what the meeting's about, and this, you're going to get sick of hearing this, but every time somebody asks us a question, our answer is always, it depends, because it does depend on a lot. It depends on who you're talking to, what you're trying to get, who's doing most of the talking, if there's a controlling person in the room, because you want to build up that person who is controlling, who is trying to shove things a certain way, and you want to label them to get them to explain to you why it's important for them for it to go that way. Okay, so the label, like I said, is important, and it's more like it seems like you have a lot of experience in this area and probably know which way we should take this, and then just let them talk.
And if you've got a bunch of people in that room and one of them seems to be the decision maker and you've got a bunch of other ones who are jumping in, again, with the remember your tone of voice, very important. And all you have to say when that one jumps in over there and this is where you want to go, you say, I'm so sorry, I want to hear what you have to say, but would you be, it's a no-oriented question, and you'll learn about this in our stuff. Would you be against hearing him out so that we can fully explore that, and then we'll come back to that. And let them know you're not saying, okay, hold on, I want to get to this.
Mm-hmm.
You're not dismissing them. You're saying what you have to say is important to me, but let's stick over here. And those little bits of that conversation where they're giving you permission with an oriented question, you're gonna be better. And treat everybody in there like they were a decision maker, like they were a shot caller. Be curious.
Because if you don't treat everybody in there like they have a voice in this situation and like what they have to say matters, eventually they will turn on you. They'll become your deal killer. They won't want to work for you. They won't want to do what you want to do. They won't want to help you do anything. And do not underestimate the power of a no-oriented question, because when you give someone a no, people love to say no. And so let them say no. Let them say no when it means yes for you. And when you do that, like Don said, the way he he phrased it, he actually asked them permission to not talk to them and to talk to this guy instead. And if they go against that, it kind of makes them look bad in the room. So they're going to say, oh no, go ahead. And then you get to have what you want. And you've been really, really nice about it. And you've not been like, well, look, I don't want to hear from you. I want to hear from him, because that's not the way to go. Did that answer the question?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to give you a magic bullet for this being easy, but especially in a group setting, it is not. But as you practice with this, it will become a lot smoother.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think
You'll
Don
see
talked,
the paths.
yeah, what Don talked about is when things get amazing in a meeting, we have a lot of interrupters, controllers, and we'll ask a teacher something, like we'll ask like more about their data, and somebody from the district level jumps in and I want to say lovely, smart aleck things, right? But that doesn't serve me. And I always say, would you be opposed to letting Don finish and then we could have your input, Sandy? And then do it in a like, not like that, right? But like we can hear both. And that again, that district person that's doing that is afraid this teacher is going to say something that's going to reveal something. The
Yep.
good news is we want everything revealed so we can address it. It's not our advocates don't replace them. Gotcha. We need to reveal it so we can deal with it, right? And so that's really important, Don. So go back and listen to this and steal his words. And you know, when I'm out there and I Don Fieselman somebody, I'm like, yes.
It works really well. Where I first started really picking up the importance of this was testifying in front of a jury. Because when I testify in front of a jury, I always turn my chair and I address the jury. So a attorney will ask me a question and I'll look at the attorney and then I answer the question to the jury.
Mhm.
And I've gotten scolded by defense attorneys who were mad about that, because what we were supposed to be doing was arguing. And instead I was employing this for the jury. I was answering this for the jury. Same thing in your meetings. When you have an interrupter, all you have to do when somebody interrupts like that and says, well, you know, blah, 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 and you realize they don't want that person to reveal something, then you just turn to that person and label it. It sounds like you've got some good stuff to share. And you do your no order question with them and then label about what it seems like they don't want you to know. Again, don't do this on the dark side. Don't do it to manipulate. Just genuine curiosity. If they're that interested in you not asking a question or not getting some information, that's where we're pointing.
So
That's what-
Don, here's something that we have in our meeting is a lot. Well, Don, we have the agenda. You know, and analysts, we have our agenda. We've got to push through this. We got to get done. We have to be done in 12 minutes. Sandy has to go to the dog groomer. We have to push through. We got to just keep going.
It sounds like we might need to schedule another meeting so that we can tackle all these issues.
No, we're going to finish today. We're going to get through it, but we're not going to stop and just keep talking about everything.
It seems like you have a vision for this solution.
And what he's saying is so good, you guys. Go back, write this down 100 times, put it on post-it notes, because when the meeting comes off the rails, and probably 50% of them do, when you bring representation or you're a really well-informed parent or you have an attorney, we have differences of vision for these children's outcomes. So that's good. I also want to say, are we delivering a baby or are we writing a child's future? I don't say that, but it's in here. We've got to push through this like it's labor delivery.
I will say, if you have someone who is constantly counterproductive like that, though, sometimes they need to be called out.
Yeah,
And
with an iMessage.
with an iMessage. And people, when they hear say iMessage, they're like, oh, you know, I feel when you say, but it's not, we don't do it. This is not a therapy iMessage. This is an iMessage. It's a very assertive move. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, when you try to rush the meeting through every time, I feel as if we're doing a disservice to this student, because we're not getting anything resolved that we need to resolve to have this student be successful. And you're doing it very calmly. It's being assertive, That's why you never use an assertive tone of voice. But if you've got that person that constantly, they're more worried about shoving the meeting through than they are taking care of what that student needs, you need to call it out somehow. And that's the nicest way to do it. In an assertive way, you're calling them out, but you're also making it like, look, the kid is the most important thing here. And you're basically belittling that. And this is what we're supposed to be doing here, is essentially what you're saying in a very nice way.
Don't do an iMessage until you've learned what they are and practice them, because they
Yes.
are the hardest skill to get right.
And they're
They,
very
they have a
assertive.
structure, but yeah, they are assertive.
They're very
And to Karen's point, you're going to probably want to self-label at least 3 things before, because you're going to want to say, if you talk again, I'm going to, you gotta
Don't
self-label
do this, Don.
and structure. Yeah. If you're pointing with your full hand,
Oh, that's
there's, yeah. You got to self-label and say, it seems like this person's triggering me. What is the motivation here? How has this worked for them in the past? They're, so.
Alicia, you have a couple more that we can rapid fire?
Well, one is 20 million or 20 billion bits of information. I've heard both.
It's 20
Million.
million and 40. It's 40 and then 20 million.
There's different studies, but it's never been 20 billion.
Yeah.
If somebody's
feels like
processing
it.
if somebody's processing 20 billion bits, that's who you need to take stock advice from.
That's Elon Musk. He's
Yeah, there you
processing
go.
that many.
Okay. Question for Don or Sandy. I am digesting all the information tonight. However, I'm struggling because in my meetings, I am gaslit so bad, and I blame 100% of my daughter's educational neglect, academic performance, and ableism on the school staff and school district admins.
So there are going to be specific things that you're going to want to do. And we haven't gotten to some of the skills that are going to be the most beneficial for you. There's something called an accusations audit, that if you are going to go assertive in any way, shape, or form, you want to use some audits first. And it sounds like this has been something that's going on for a really long time. Therefore, you want to come out with a few audits where you kind of preemptively label those negative things that are going to be felt by them when you say these things that you need to say about the feelings of the way things have gone for you. You want to set their expectations and you want to have them prepared for what you're about to say. And so an audit is the way to go. And then you just label that dynamic, the things that you basically just said. That whole question that she just read, there are things that you could actually label using that question instead of putting it all together in one big thing and going at somebody. Break it down into smaller pieces and just label the right person with the appropriate thing that you're concerned about there, and let them give you more information about it. Because you can do that, and what you're doing is you're letting them know, I'm on to you and you're not doing the right thing here, but you're not calling them out on it. You're allowing them to save face by labeling it so that you're not calling them out. Because if you start doing that, that's not going to work in your favor. You're going to cause a reaction on that side. You're going to trigger them. They're going to feel attacked, and then boom, everybody gets really dumb in the room, because that's what happens. So that's better. Few audits at the beginning before you use a label on somebody who is specifically responsible for whichever one of those things you're going to go after first, because you can't really do them all at the same time, unfortunately.
And remember, tactical empathy, the one of the things it unlocks is collaboration, even with somebody you don't agree with, even with somebody you dislike. If you think they're gaslighting you, you're not going to like that person, but you still have to collaborate with them to get where you need to go. And so just when they say something that feels like you're being gaslit, when they say something you don't like, remember that label. It seems like you have a reason for feeling that way, or it sounds like this has worked for you in the past, or any of those things, to get them to explain themselves. So that what you'll see a lot of times is people will, as they're going through, as they're giving you more information, they're on a little bit of a self-discovery journey of their own, and they say things out loud and it sounds horrible to them. They realize how stupid their ideas were, and they're going to bring that around in a way that, again, like Sandy said, they get to save face, but they can talk it out, and with that self-discovery, they'll get on board with collaborating with you in a way that's productive instead of what they're doing now, which is in some form of bartering, where they're trying to get what they want, and they're just hammering it through with gaslighting or with any of the other issues.
Yeah, and I would say I've had the opportunity to use these skills successfully. I've used them unsuccessfully, which is called learning. And I've had situations that before I would have just said, that's it, we're going to reschedule. And by correct use of these 9 skills, we've addressed it, diffused it, and we're able to go back to the meeting like we were normal, calm adults. So it is these are so good for, they make things recoverable instead of, yeah, and we're both out of here. Because at the end of the day, the kids that we serve, it's a 10, 12, 15-year commitment. It's not like, yeah, Dawn, and I'm never going to see you again. You're going to see him elementary school, junior high, high school, 2 or 3 times a year. So it's imperative, especially for these children, that we learn these skills and apply them.
And it will make it easier for you.
Mhm.
If you commit to these, it unlocks so many doors, and not just in the meetings, but in your everyday life.
Yeah.
And it seriously, I am amazed almost every day. And I'm like Karen, I'm practicing these every day, and
Yes.
we all stumble. We
Yep.
all drop into that first and second layer of listening sometimes. But when you get more natural with these, when you start trusting this process, you are going to relieve yourself of a lot of stress you never run into.
And I just want to add, I use one of these labels, and sometimes I feel like because Don and Sandy are my coaches, I was like, I wanted to call them and give them, they were going to give me a pep talk, and I just went in. I used a label on a TikTok messenger for somebody that I've never met, who basically had told me no, really told me no. And I was like, I'm going to try this. And every time I'm so excited. And I said, would you be against? And I said it. And she said, I wouldn't be against that. I'm like, okay. Of course, it's all by text, right? So this works in literally talking to people, communicating, because there's nothing easier to mess up than typing something out. So we use these skills live and in all forms of written and verbal expression.
They just know that written is a little more difficult because there's no tone in the written word. There's your tone that you think you're giving, and then there's the reader's tone.
Right.
So don't hide behind a text, don't hide behind an email, and don't let your counterpart hide behind that either.
Mhm.
If they're wanting to do everything over email or over text, the correct response is, would you be against jumping on a 7-minute phone call? Or would you be against jumping on a 27-minute phone call? Whatever it is, get them where they have to talk.
Yeah.
Get them where you're not giving away a bunch of your moves in advance through an email.
Mhm.
And I would like to add one thing on to that. Sandy used to be a teacher. I have been at Black Swan for almost 3 years now, but my son is sped, so I have to use these, and I'm very, very passionate about, all the kids that are kind of left out. I was a teacher at one point too. So even before I met the amazing Karen, who definitely put my people at my son's school in their place very politely, I have had to use these skills for all of that too. So if you don't take anything from Sandy and Dawn, take it from me as a parent who's had to go through these difficult times with my son, because honestly, he's my everything. So if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so our next few ones are, parents just asking about, they're all Karen questions, the boss questions. So I don't know, how many.
Yeah, just fire away.
Okay. My 8-year-old son has autism and is in a self-contained classroom. We recently had our triennial review, and in his speech evaluation, he scored low in all articulation domains. However, when we had his annual IEP meeting, there were no speech articulation goals. I expressed dismay over this, and his speech therapist said that it's because his teacher usually understands him and because his speech deficits don't prevent him from accessing the curriculum. She denied including these goals. I suspect that is because speech is not a well-resourced at his school, and therapists at his school have to also alternate between going to other schools. to conduct group speech sessions. However, my son was previously receiving a combination of individual and group speech therapy. How do I get them to include articulation goals in his IEP?
Sure, and a lot of that is because of the setting they're in, depending on a student's cognition or development. We would say that their language is commensurate with their development. So I would just say, would you agree that his articulation is not in the norm to average range? And then if she says the 7th percentile is, then almost always you can get them to be in agreement. And would you be opposed to considering some consult and direct time to see if we can work on mitigating the acuity of his disability? Yeah, no, I wouldn't be. And it's sort of when you use no, or you can see people like trip. It's like when you trip over, you look back, like, I don't know why we look back, and they're like, oh, okay. Would you be opposed, right? Instead of like, the law says if he's in the 7th percentile, you have to, that doesn't go well. And so, you want to, first I would ask if it's a deeper question. No, it seems like you have a reason, for making that recommendation to the committee. Let them talk, and she'll probably tell you what I just said, because he's in self-contained. We think it's commensurate. We don't really, and then listen to her, take notes while she's talking. That's interactive listening. And then just say, I would go back to that and see if you can get some movement there.
May I add something?
Yes.
Don't forget, in these cases that it's easy to try to argue logic, but feeling is a type of thinking. People don't make decisions based on logic. So, and that goes up the scale. Nobody really, every decision we make, we have an emotion to it. We have some feeling with it, and then we grab facts to support our position. So when you're doing this, remember you're talking to a person, and they might be delivering logic of an organization. So you want to reach that person. And in a situation like that, I would ask the teacher or whoever it is you're talking to. I wouldn't ask, I would label. It seems like you don't see much value in blah, 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 blah. Because if that person does see value in it, and you're correct about the fact that it's not well resourced, they're going to be all of a sudden they're on your side, because they're going to tell you, no, I do see the value in it. We just don't have the people. And now you've got confirmation one on what your answer, what's going on, but the other side feels good because you didn't accuse them of ignoring it because they're not well resourced. You asked them if they didn't see the value, or you labeled them, it seems like you don't see the value here. And people they want to collaborate. They don't want to be uncomfortable. So they'll let you know.
Okay, perfect. I have tried getting my child to help throughout the school day, or I need some articulation goals. Okay,
That's
let's
easy
try
for
this
you to
again.
say.
Yeah. I have tried getting my child to see, it's not me, it's how it's typed. They've tried getting their child help throughout the school day. Okay. They are obviously struggling. The special education teacher has done nothing to reevaluate him or try any new accommodations. The parents try nothing. Their only one suggestion is to introduce social stories. I don't see how that will help him with the problems he is having. However, the special education teacher has done nothing all year about helping my child. It's mostly emailing the parents for us to deal with it. The principal and another have told me it's not her job to do that.
So it sounds like a teacher's asking this question. Is that right?
No, I think it's the parent. I've tried to get my child help.
Okay, so I'm saying this to you lovingly, there are a lot of assumptions there, and I've been in the same place. I assumed when certain things were going on with baby James, all of these things. And I'm not saying that you're right or wrong, but you could be completely right or completely wrong. It's probably somewhere in the middle. I think it's imperative that we get to the table, right? And just kind of walk through those pieces and talk about different ways that we could pivot to address that. So when we have kiddos that don't make expected gains based upon rate of progress in history, there's always a why. There's always a reason for that outcome. So I would sit down with the committee, and it could even be a parent-teacher conference, and say, could we talk about this? Could we talk about one of the things I always say is, I don't know what you do, Alicia, but James loves doing math with you. He throws his math book across the table. Can you share with me your secret sauce when you're working with him? And then listen, not, well, you're doing that wrong, right? And when you did that, tell me about the outcomes that you got, and have a deep exploring conversation, because Alicia, you're a self-contained teacher, and kind of what Don said, people don't know what they don't know, and we have a tendency to teach to the middle, even if we're special ed. And it's our job to collaborate. That means we're co-laboring. We're both in labor. Nobody has any medicine, and we're trying to get the right outcome. But I find when you sit down with people, this is a belly to belly, high impact world, that you're going to get more gains than emails or assumptions. But you're probably as frustrated as they are, but that would be my recommendation, that you start with the sit down meeting and kind of just walk through those pieces and see where we can make adjustments, pivot. And sometimes you find out that they're not, and it's not that they're not willing to pivot. We don't usually know the reason why they don't pivot, but then you'll know your next steps and if you have to, exercise any of your procedural rights.
Okay, well, Mr. Don has to leave us.
Yes.
So we want to thank him for his time.
Yes, and we also want to thank Sandy too. She has to, get in her carriage and, go off to the castle as she does every night. But I just want to thank you both so much. We're going to keep them forever. They don't know that. It's a surprise. And we're going to do a series so that you guys are equipped. If you don't know, the books that are going to be amazing for you are Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That is in our bookstore. And Ego, Authority, and something.
Failure.
Oh, a word I'm not even familiar with, but Ego, Authority, and Failure is also in our bookstore by Derek Gaunt. They both are amazing at describing and implementing and using the negotiating 9. Get them both physically and get them both, auditorily. I said it in my gentle, assertive way. That will give you more questions to ask these amazing trainers when they come back. And we just want to thank both of you so much. We appreciate your time giving it to us. And remember, you guys, when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. And we'll see you in the next training.
Thanks for having us.